Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Chambers, and I want to welcome you guys no matter where you are in the world, no matter what you're doing. I'm just happy that you guys have the chance to stop by and talk some travel with me. That's right. So I hope you're safe and healthy. So get that favorite beverage, stuffed animal, blanket, or that furry friend and curl up so we can talk some travel. That's right. Today, we're going to be talking about van life. That's right, van life. Why not? I know. We're also going to talk about how to decide which van to buy if you're interested in getting into the van life. Also, a lot of people question RV versus van, so we'll jump into that. And stay tuned to the end because I'm going to talk about some of the best national parks that you can camp in. So let's get started. So we're jumping into talking about van life today, and a lot of you I know are sitting here going, oh no, van life's not for me. But for many people out there, van life is for them. And, you know, it's always interesting because I ran into somebody, it was probably a while ago, and they were talking about getting into van life or RV life. And that was my big question at the time, you know, my living style. I said, why van life? And all they did to reply to me was say, why not? And they have a point. It's to each his own, right? But van life can be very appealing to many people, and there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just taking a van and, you know, going and living that nomadic lifestyle. Wait a minute. Yes, it is. There's a lot more to it, of course, than that. But yes, that's pretty much it. You want to have that freedom. And that's why I say van life can be very appealing for many people. So you have this, it's the freedom of travel, this romantic idea that you can pick up and go anywhere at any time. Now, I know there's plenty of you out there that love to travel, love to backpack, you know, and don't like to have anything with you. You just, you know, find a way to get a flight, a bus, a train, whatever mode of transportation that you don't have to deal with taking care of. That way you are only taking care of yourself and what belongings that you have. And that's works for so many people, and I think it's great. I've seen it done. It's continuing to be something that people do. But you think about it, you know, you have your things. You're paying for hotels, and you're paying for places to stay, or having to figure out, you know, where to keep your things that you're traveling with. And many people now, especially, you know, this day and age, that are full-time travelers are vlogging and blogging and doing all kinds of things and photography. And so they're traveling with a little bit more of, I would say, expensive equipment or things that you don't want to have to replace. That never used to be, you know, I guess maybe 20 years ago, when people were just traveling, or maybe even 10 years ago. Maybe you don't even have to go back that far. And you didn't have necessarily a laptop. And you might have a cell phone, maybe not. You know, it just kind of depended. Everyone usually had cameras of some kind, but they've gotten so sophisticated and small and compact, and, you know, it makes it a little bit easier, but they've also gotten more expensive and can do so much more. You know, now you have people that are traveling with drones to get footage and all these things, and external hard drives so they can do this editing if they're doing video or photography and all kinds of things. So you have a little bit more of equipment to deal with when traveling to those places. So you have to be careful where you're booking and things like that. So going back to the van life, now if you have your own transportation, your own way of keeping your things and locking things up, right then and there, you're not limited to choosing where you go necessarily, in the sense that it's not secure. So you'll be able to have that peace of mind that everything that you have and the belongings that you are essential to you, that you want to have with you and travel with, are secure and locked up, and also go with you everywhere you go. And so that's a big plus for it. People think about, why don't you just get in a car and drive? Well, yes, but then you're talking about needing a little bit of space, or having to then drive somewhere and do a road trip and plan out where you're staying in a hotel or what stops you need to make. Van life is really no different when you think about it, because you're doing the same thing. You're driving somewhere, and instead of having to book a hotel, you already have your bed or your sleeping arrangements already there. You just have to make sure you plan out where you're parking your car, or is there, a lot of places there are free places to park your car, so you don't even have to pay. So you're saving money in that sense. And for those of you that are listening and saying, well, I don't really understand the concept of van life. And well, here it is. Van life is this nomadic style of living that you basically live in your van and you travel around. There's several different ways to do it. There's many different styles of vans to do it, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But it's getting to the point where I'm seeing now so many people embrace this style of living that it's becoming this huge way of life, and it's allowing people to travel. Not only that, it's allowing people to be a little bit more debt-free with their lives and enjoy just living. And I think that's the huge draw to it. When I talked about earlier, and I mentioned the freedom to travel, of this like romantic idea in van life, it can. But again, every pro has for every pro there's also a con when you think about it. So a little bit of when we say why not van life, some people say, well, I don't know what to do with all my stuff. And downsizing, that's a big thing, and it can be. We get attached to so many materialistic things, and some things are very difficult to let go of, and not because you need it as an essential thing for your life, right? It could have so much sentimental value. It could have been something special that reminds you of something in your life that you just don't want to part with because you feel like you're getting rid of a memory or something like that. So there's plenty of ways that downsizing can become difficult. The thing that I hear from most people when they downsize is they're so glad they did it, and they realize that it took them doing that to realize how much they didn't need all of the things, all of the material things, right? They only needed the essentials, or what they consider essentials. And so that's the question for you guys. Can you give up a lot of what you have? For those of us that have apartments or even houses, would you be able to downsize into something like a van or an RV? Many people have done it. I mean, there's so many people and are still doing it, which is fantastic. Some people, they just know that can't work for them. So, and a challenge, let's go to a hypothetical here. If you are considering joining the van lifers or, getting an RV, what would you downsize? Or let's just say we're going on a camping trip and you cannot come back to your home on that camping trip. You get in that RV, it is now your home. Or a very long camping trip, let's say 3 months. You're going to go on a 3-month camping trip in an RV or van. What would you take and what would you leave behind? Obviously, family members, pets, things like that will come with us. But what materialistic things would you give up? Some people, things like a coffee maker has to go with them because they need coffee. And I'm kind of one of those people, but I would be more inclined to look at giving up like my Keurig and going more with like one of those French presses or those mini, coffee makers. I could make do with that. I would have to have my guitar. I'd have to bring that. If for me, that's essential no matter where I'm going. My wife and our dog obviously are super essential. That probably should have been the first thing I said, but she knows I love her. But yes, those things would be essential. You're going to obviously have to have clothes, but what clothes do you need? How much is too much? Because we get really into what we own and, how many different style of shoes and things like that. And it's really hard. I mean, I challenge you to really think about it. And personally, for me, it's hard. And I thought about this all week, prior to recording this podcast. What would I give up that would be hard for me? And I started making a list, and my list got longer and longer. And I'm like, oh, no, I can't give that up. Oh, no, I can't give that up. It's really interesting to think about that, because I have a piano and I love to play. But, if I had to give up the piano, I would still keep the guitar, right? I mean, a lot of workout clothes and things like that, but, I'd be okay with giving up things like suits. I'd maybe keep like one sport jacket or something and give up things like that I don't really wear as much anymore. I'm in, podcasting and recording and things like that. I would want to keep, a small setup and things like that, but I'd be willing to sell most of my stuff to downsize, because these days it's so incredible the equipment you can buy that's so small. I mean, it's really great. But a lot of the kitchen stuff that we'd have to give up. A large king size bed. That was a really big one. I sat there and go, oh, could I give that up to go to van life? I think I could, as long as what I was sleeping on was comfortable. Now, I know that one was really a hard one for my wife, but you just go through your stuff, and I challenge you to try to think about it. It's a lot harder than you think. And there's stuff that you probably have in your home or apartment that you will find and be like, oh, no, I can't give that up. So check that out. But if you are considering van life or, RV life as a long-term, for travel or doing long trips, it could be good practice if that's something you want to do permanently, maybe if you retire or move into the lifestyle completely. So a lot of people say, oh yeah, that sounds romantic. That sounds amazing. I could travel everywhere and it'd be less cost efficient, but it does cost something to get involved, because one, you got to buy a van. You got to have it. Now there are ways to find vans, and shop deals, or with, maybe someone that has one that you can transform into a van. But after you do renovations and get a van and build everything up, it can get anywhere between, $60,000 to $100,000 just to do those. RVs are very expensive too, and they can range in that same range, even more. Some of them, if you're getting deluxe RVs and you're living like the luxury lifestyle with that, those can get up into the millions, of course. But if you're trying to make something that is livable, that you can move around a lot and travel, you're going to be spending anywhere between, $60,000 to $150,000, somewhere in between there, most likely, for something that's minimum. Now, you can do a lot of renovations yourself. It's going to be a lot more work, but it is possible. So you just have to keep that in mind, that it's buying a house basically. But the great thing is, if you are considering moving from, a home that you have and selling your home, what you get from selling your home is pretty much what you're putting into. Because a lot of people I know, when they sell their home and they move somewhere else, they use that to move into another home. So that's a way of thinking about it if you're transitioning into that lifestyle. For someone like me who's coming from apartment living, it's, yes, money I'm not having to pay every month, but I'm having to save and use savings or whatever to put that upfront cost for whatever vehicle I choose. So it's just something to think about as well for some of you. A lot of people always ask, how do people earn money, driving around in a van and just traveling, living the lifestyle? Well, again, these days, as we've learned from COVID, you can work almost anywhere. Some people can do their full-time job remotely. Some people get creative and they've gotten into, vlogging or photography, like I mentioned earlier, as a full-time traveler. There's a lot of different ways. And, the other way is some people just decide, when I retire, I don't want to retire in a community or home. I just want to get into a van and just go live off the land or just travel and see things. So there's a lot of different ways that you can look at that, but those are definitely a possibility to have a full-time job, because you got to be able to pay for gas and other things, right? So you have to have money coming in somewhere. But there, you can go online and look at different ways that people make money. I've seen a lot of the full-time travelers making a lot of money off of social media. I've also heard of people that continue to do their full-time job that they were doing while living in an apartment and a house and just do it remotely. And again, especially with the light that's been shined on with COVID and quarantine, it's made it a lot more possible for lifestyles like this to really excel, which is kind of exciting. The other thing that was interesting when I thought about it is, you're limited on traveling to places you can only drive. And I thought about that, and I dug around a little bit, and I found out that people can and have traveled to different countries and gone across the sea that, obviously required a boat. And I thought, well, there's not ferries and you can't put them on a cruise ship. No, they use cargo ships, and they'll basically check their vehicle, RV, van, or something into a cargo, onto a cargo ship, and then they would just travel to whatever country, and then they would meet it there, and they'd go pick it up at the shipping yard. And that's kind of a cool thought. But then I thought about, well, you're just basically dropping everything you own and your mode of transportation and living. Basically, you're giving somebody a home and putting on a cargo ship and hoping that it's intact when you get there. And there's been a lot of apparently horror stories that have been told, of people saying that their parts have been stripped or things have been taken, things like that. So I looked into it a little bit more, and others said to fix this problem, you could have, if you have a van, especially if you're in the van life specifically, you could get a cargo shipping container, and you could lock your vehicle in the shipping container and have it shipped. And that's a really great idea. The thing is, with the van, this is really possible. If you're going to go to the RV, and we'll talk more about, the pros and cons of RVs versus vans in another segment, but if you're going to go with an RV, it makes it a little bit harder to fit into a cargo container because they're much bigger. So a van life can be very, very appealing, because not only are you able to drive around, through Canada, the U.S., Mexico, South America, you can ship it overseas, and then now you have your own transportation to travel around, Asia, Europe, all kinds of places. Go to Australia, things like that. So it's really, really incredible. So anyway, there you go. Why not van life? A lot of things are pros. There are a lot of pros to living van life, and if you are just wanting to be the ideal traveler and just be that nomadic, romantic lifestyle, then, look into van life. Well, coming up after the break, I'm going to talk about how to decide which van that you should buy if this is something that you want to get into. So stick with me.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. We just finished talking about van life, or, what is van life, and is it for me, right? And I'm going to answer that. It is maybe for you, maybe not. It really depends on the kind of traveler you are. But that's the great thing about van life. Make sure you stay tuned to the end of the show, because we're going to talk about the best national parks to camp in. Whether you're a van lifer or not, this could be great for anybody. So since we just finished talking about van life, or how and why you should consider van life, well, you need to consider which van to buy, right? So there's a plethora of choices out there for everyone. There's two, we're specifically going to talk about vans. So we're going to get into a couple different styles, but I'm sure you guys can do your research, check into it, look at all the specs, whatever works for you. Because what works for you is not always going to work for somebody else, and that's the biggest thing. So customizing a van can be a daunting task, but it can be a really fun task, especially if you're one of those very creative people and loves to plan things like that. It can be very exciting. But there are several different types of vans. One style is a low-top camper van, or a high-top camper van. And that's basically, one has a lower ceiling that you have and one has the higher ceiling. So depending whether you care about wanting to stand up straight up in your van or not can maybe be a deciding factor. Again, all of this could be budget related too. So if you're looking on the lower budget to do, a van lifestyle, then the low top camper van might be the way that you want to go, because it's definitely going to be more cost efficient. Some people like to travel with that and also have it like they have a tent and things so they can get out and basically just kind of live in their van. And if they need more space, they can set a little canopy out or, really pull a tent out if they really want. And the one place that I did, it wasn't really a van life, but we rented a van for about a week. It was about a week. And we were traveling around Tasmania. We had flown down from Melbourne to Tasmania, and we decided that, there's a lot of outdoors, a lot of national parks, a lot of places to go, which was amazing. So we decided that we were just going to do this little camper van. And we got a low-top camper van. It was relatively small. In fact, it said have a devil of a time on it, which was really great. And the back seat had a table in it. So it had a bench with a table, with a pole in the middle of the floor and a table on top of that. So we had a table in there. And then on the very back side, there was a little sink with a pump. So you put your water in it. It was probably about I don't know, I'd probably say a 3 to 5 gallon water tank, back there, and you just pour your fresh water in there, and then you would pump it into the sink. So you would pump your water to wash dishes and things like that. And then we had a little propane tank next to it with a little burner that we could slide out and use that to cook. And to sleep in it, so then there were 2 seats in the front seat, driver and passenger seat. And then behind, in the back in the cab where the table was, to make it a bed, you just lifted the tabletop off and the pole out, and you put it down and then moved the cushions over, and it just laid into a bed. And that was essentially what we had for about a week. And they had little curtains and things so we could have privacy. But me and my buddy, we had a great time. It wasn't a lifestyle for me, or at least with that type of van, that I would want to have now. The older I get, the more I want to be a little bit more comfortable. That was more for a very rugged lifestyle. If you're purely outdoors and you don't really care about that kind of things, and you don't, you're comfortable finding places and parks that you can use their amenities and showers and bathrooms and things like that, then that's might be something you want to consider. It's definitely more of a cost-efficient way for a van lifer. But for me, if I was to go into it and live now, I would go for a high-top van. So I'd like to stand up. I'm not very tall anyway, and I'd still like to stand up, and many people do. And I think it's just something, when you don't have that capability, to stand up, you notice it a lot more, right? If you have to hunch over. So it wears on you, messes with your back, things like that. So I recommend the high top van, especially if this is something of a home that you're considering, right? And people say, oh, well, you're not going to be in it that much, you're traveling. Well, yes and no, because there's days that you might just have an everyday where you just want to veg out and relax, work on some things, or it could be raining and you're inside your van, and so whatever it may be, a high top van is what I would recommend. So let's talk about a couple different styles. Okay, now the biggest thing that people need to pay attention to is the wheelbase. And I'm going to be giving out numbers and you're going to be like, whoa, well, what does that mean? Well, basically, wheelbase is the distance between the front and rear axles of the van. So the longer the distance, the bigger the van. And also the bigger the van, the more things that you can do with it, customizing it and put in it, more amenities, things like that. And then the other downside is the harder it is to make turns, U-turns, maneuver, and get it places. So it's really where you want to go and what you want to put in your van is what's going to make your choice here. So starting with a high-top van, a big common style of van, or at least one of the more popular models, is the Mercedes Sprinter van. And about a wheelbase of 144, that gives you about 59 square feet of living. Okay, so that's a high top, so you're able to stand. And 59 square feet is not a lot of living space in a van, but it's enough. And I've heard plenty of people that love it. And a lot of people that when they start with a Sprinter van, like to start out with a smaller wheelbase because, they're easier to handle, easier to drive, gets used to doing that. But the downside is not a lot of room for a shower and toilet and things like that. So there's a couple other amenities that you might want to look to upgrade. So if you're looking to upgrade, you can always go to a larger wheelbase at about 170 extended. So the extended Sprinter van, a little bit longer, gives you 89 square feet. So that's quite a jump right there. That's almost 30 more square feet, about 30 more square feet that you're getting there. And that allows you to put in things like a shower. That's right. I have seen Sprinter vans with a shower in there, right? And it also allows you to get a full-size kitchen. So you'll have a sink with a little stove in there and also, a full to queen size bed. So there are plenty of possibilities to do that. I mean, you can also get a toilet. And a lot of times when I see the toilet, they're usually in the shower. And people are like, well, what do you do if you get a compost toilet? You can basically pull it in and pull it out. There are other ways you can empty it manually, depending on what style of toilet you have. But that's usually what a lot of people do. Some people leave it in there. I wouldn't leave it in there if I was taking a shower. I'd want something I can move. But some people do. They leave it in there, and they'll take a shower, and that's kind of just their bathroom and the way they set it up. So that's another way to go. So right there, so you can get the Mercedes Sprinter van 170 extended. It gives you a little bit more storage space too, because the bed's up, so you can store things under. It also, you think about with more space, it can, optimize, your water tanks. Because I was talking about my little van that we had in Tasmania. We had that little pump, 3 to 5 gallon water tank, which was nothing. Right? So if you're having to use a shower and you have a sink in there for, things for cooking, you're going to want a much larger water tank. And so you're thinking like, 30 gallon or plus more of water, right? That you're going to have to, maintain. And that's the other thing about these when you start adding amenities to it. When you add amenities to it, there's more chances for things to go wrong. And people don't sometimes think that because they're like, "Ooh, this is great, I want this." But then there's more to deal with. And again, if I was going to go into the life, I would want a toilet, I would want a shower, and some kind of kitchen. And for me, I like the extended because I like to bike, and so my wife and I love riding bikes, and so that would be something we want extra storage space for, along with our things. So extended, yes, it does make it a little harder, or have to be a little more finessed with how you maneuver it and how you drive and be comfortable with a larger size of van. But for me, I think it's really worth it. Again, it all depends on your budget and what you have, because some of these vans can get very high end, even for a Sprinter van. They can be, a lot of them have solar panels on top, or you can put, racks and things like that. But again, you have to be aware that if you're traveling and this is your home and wherever you're parking and you leave it, you want to make sure you feel safe with everything you have. Because if something happens or someone steals your van, that's your home. They basically went off with your home. So, and there are ways, and there to put little security systems in your van when doors open and things like that. So you might want to check into that. Another option that's not quite as big, but it does have a high top end capabilities of a shower and things like that, is a Promaster van. And Ram makes a great Promaster van, and there's one with a wheelbase of 159, and it's extended as well, and it gives you 84 square feet. So it's not quite as big as the Mercedes Sprinter van 170, but it does have the same feeling. So you're not paying quite as much for it, but you have a full functioning kitchen, shower, toilet, bed, and plenty of storage. So those are just a couple of options that you might want to consider when you're planning out or looking into getting into the van life. A lot of people, when they start considering looking into it, they do a little test run. There are people out there, and you can go online and find vans and rent them for a little extended stay and really decide if it's for you. I mean, a lot of times I think it's a little easier, in my opinion, to do it with RVs and not really feel the difference on a short trip. It's different if you make the plunge and have nothing else, and that's where you have to be. I think that's where it gets real. But again, this has to be a lifestyle for you. But if you're considering it, talk to a friend or look online and see if you can rent one. And just do your research. Because once you get into it, you can go down that rabbit hole. And one place, if you do decide to do this, I'd love to hear about it and what your experience is. But customize it, because that's the beauty of getting the van or getting into the van life. Not only that freedom and that romantic, bliss of going anywhere you want, but you can fix it up and customize it the way you want it. With anything, obviously, you can do that. But if you are looking to do that, I would look and do van fixer-uppers. You can go to van fixer-uppers if this is your jam right here, and just get a quote. Talk to them. They'll have some great suggestions for you. They'll probably ask you things. You'll find out you're asking yourself, what do I need? What do I want? And then how to incorporate that. And the fun thing is, once you start getting into the essentials of what you're putting in your van, then you get to add the little touches and flavors and flares of your personality, which is really great. So it's like anybody's home. It's an extension of yourself. So there you go. Those are a couple recommendations for what types of vans you might want to look into, some popular models. But make sure you do your research, of course, because as anything, you need to make sure you go in with your own knowledge. So coming up, we're going to talk about RVs versus van, because I know some of you have already been thinking of it. They're like, he's talking a lot about vans, but what about RVs? So stick around and we will get into that next.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. We were just talking about what types of vans should you get or look into if you're considering going into the van life. And so we had some great suggestions, but as always, do your research, pass that information along. There's a lot out there. Make sure it works for you and make sure that you're going through the right channels to do it. But right now, we're going to be talking about RVs versus vans. That's right, because a lot of people just say, why not get an RV? Why limit yourself on the space? You can still have that nomadic, romantic lifestyle of living, and you can travel and go to all kinds of places just as you could a van. Well, there really are some differences. Now, some are a plus and some are a con, but we're going to talk about it. So let's jump into talking about RVs first. So first of all, RVs been around for a long time. Not that vans haven't, but people using RVs and going camping are kind of a thing, right? When you think about going camping and not doing the traditional tent or cabin. RVs are very popular, especially in national parks. And there's a lot of different styles of RVs. You can get the really huge RVs, very luxurious, have the pop out sides, things like that. You can get the, Class A, Class B, or Class C. If you're not comfortable driving large, bus type of RVs or style of vehicles, then you're probably not going to want to go with like Class C. You're going to want to stay with the Class A, Class B. Class A's almost feel like a regular truck and things like that. And they can be really great, and they can still give you that space. Another style of RV that you can go with is a towable RV, or what they call a fifth wheel RV. So if you have a truck or a really heavy duty car that can take a trailer or things like that, you can hook that up to your car, and then you have basically your home on wheels. So you can drive wherever you need to, and then you can have your living space behind you. Class B RVs are more of what I think we think of when doing road trips and things like that. They're connected with the cab, and they give you enough space, a little bit bigger than what would consider like kind of a camper van RV style, and you're able to have your showers and your bathroom and a little living room and kitchen and things like that in it. But the interesting thing thinking about the towable RV is that you really utilize your space a lot more. Right, because when what they call the fifth wheel, that just means that the bed is over the bed of the truck, so it kind of hangs off over that way. The one thing to me about the fifth wheel is dealing with the hitch. Now they say that it's more stable and it makes it feel a lot better, but you are using your car to pull it, so you're going to use up more gas. And a lot of times you're driving trucks or things that require diesel fuel, so that becomes a cost and something to consider. Now, just in general, that you have to pay diesel for, RVs anyway, but when you're having to pull something, sometimes that will eat up a little bit more gas, or you're not going to get as much off your gas in gas mileage. So that's just something to consider. You can go to an RV fixer-upper and you can customize your RV job, and you can really look and find what works for you and completely change it and make it your personality. I mean, it's great. The best thing I could probably say about RVs is that you have more space. Plain and simple. So if you're one of those people that when we talked about earlier, downsizing was a problem for you, or you don't think you'd be able to figure out what to get rid of, what to take, what to keep, then an RV might be for you. I mean, if you just want to keep more of your things or want more space, then definitely look into an RV over a van. If you think about it, RVs are much larger anyway, so you can have, your bedroom will feel more separate than your living room versus everything kind of being a little bit more on top of each other, just one fluid, just kind of movement. The best thing also about RVs is when you typically go somewhere and you're going for an extended period of time. So that's why you see a lot of these RV parks. And you can book up to months and months in advance. Some people do. And sometimes you can call ahead, a week or two before, or even a few days before you get there and there's space available. It still gives you the nomadic lifestyle, but you typically are going to be staying places a lot longer, which I found interesting because a lot more people with vans are bouncing around a lot more. And I would try to think about that. I said, well, what's the big difference? And I go, well, you know what? Driving a van is a lot easier sometimes than driving a larger RV. So the fact that a van can get places that an RV can't, you know, an RV is going to go to a campground or site or wherever they can and park and then just go and travel and do their thing. Versus a van, they may go to one of those campsites, they may go to somewhere else, but they may decide that their van is small enough that they can drive a little bit more off-road or off the beaten path and go other places, and it just opens them up to a lot more. So that is just one thing to consider. You know, we're talking about this towable space. You know, if you get a towable trailer RV, it's really, you know, I don't like dealing with trailers, hitches, and things like that. So for me, it's not really appealing. But if you think about it, you keep your own car and you can detach it at wherever your campground or wherever your site is, or wherever you're staying, and then you have your home just set up right there, right? And then if you need your car, you have the capabilities of traveling somewhere. But again, you have to go back and kind of hook up and go if you're traveling to a new destination. So it really kind of depends on your style. Again, you have room for a generator, so having an AC is something you could do, or, you know, having other things like, you know, when you have propane and all that you need to have in your functioning, it just makes things a lot easier. You can have a little bit more, I'm not saying a luxurious lifestyle, but you can carry more things and make that inside living feel a little bit more wide open. Not saying you can't do that with a van. It just takes a little bit more creativity. You know, when you're given more space, you can do a little bit more with certain things. And that's what I find out when people start out with those low top vans, or those, you know, they start out in the van life with something smaller, and then they decide to upgrade and they go, oh man, I would have started with this upgrade with the high top and the shower and things like that from the beginning. And sometimes that's all they need. And then sometimes when they upgrade, they realize, oh, you know, I need even more space than that. So you may start with a van and you may end up in an RV. So you never know. It really just depends. We're always changing our lifestyles and things like that. As we get older, you know, growing up, things change and priorities shift. So that's what you have to decide at this point in life, what works for you. But again, RV is a little bit harder to maneuver, or at least take a lot more, you know, skill to be aware of, or a lot more real estate to be taken care of there as you're driving. And again, most people stay places a lot longer when using RVs. Okay, so let's look at the opposite with vans, right? So again, we talked about some of them. A little bit of a con is for a van is, again, you don't have as much space as an RV. So some vans, they can't get, you know, a full shower or something like that in it. They don't have the walls that can extend out, or maybe that they don't have enough storage space to bring some other items that they may want. You know, they might have to mount things on the back. But let me just talk about that. But let me jump. I'll jump back to my my pros and cons list in just a second. But dealing with something about vans and storage. Vans actually, if you get the extended van without having to go to an RV, you can make storage. I mean, a lot of times the beds are much higher, so that way you can have storage underneath them in a van. And one thing about RVs, they utilize their space, but there can be a lot more wasted space in an RV, just because people want to be able to move around, want that feeling of it being a little bit more open. And so things like bicycles or other large things that have to get tagged on to the roof or the back of the RV can feel a little bit daunting when you go to places where people just see your stuff hanging out, right? And vans have that too, where they mount bikes and things onto it. But I've seen a lot more use of storage, or a better use of storage with people that have van life, because they find ways to store it inside, because they don't want people to know that this is my home, this is where I live, when they go and park somewhere. So it's kind of a little bit more of a stealth mode with that. Now, sometimes, again, RVs are very noticeable. So if an RV pulls up, you know someone has an RV and most likely staying in there. Some vans, you may not even know that someone has a full-size shower, kitchen, and bed, and bike, and everything they own in their life in there. So it really kind of depends on that. So that can be a pro and a con depending on how you look at it. I look at that more as a pro in my book. And the fact that people are a little bit more creative and use their space a little bit better than most with RVs, I think goes into the plus column for vans, right? I mean, vans really, it's minimalistic. So if you are someone that needs very little or wants to downsize completely, vans are a plus for you. If you're looking to keep a lot of things or you're just not quite sure and you still want some space, then an RV might be the route to go, you know. That also being said, the other category you have to throw yourself into, and we've talked a lot about this on the podcast today, is if you want to really travel more places in your van or RV, or are you okay with going somewhere, leaving for a longer period of time, and then traveling that way? So it really depends on your style of travel. So I know there's a lot of if, ands, or buts, but these are just things I'm throwing out there. Me personally, I like the idea of van life and being able to go a lot more places and take our things and home with us, and not necessarily have to rely on going to a specific campground and basically making home base for a while. But at the same time, I would probably want a little bit more space. So if I don't get an extended van or a little bit more of a larger van, I'm going to want to go with the RV. And I like the idea of using solar panels and having everything kind of run electronically throughout the van and things like that. First, a lot of RVs are more generated based. They have batteries, but they also use a lot more of generators. I've seen that a lot more with RVs. So the other thing is, making sure that you have a toilet and things like that in there. It gives more space to it. You can have a toilet in vans, if you want a little bit more space bathroom-wise. Again, RV is going to be more of the pro and the van will be more of the con. I think that a pro is not having to use propane, personally. I like the idea of being able to use something electric. I mean, I like open flame, but sometimes propane can just be a bigger element to deal with sometimes when you're traveling. So a lot more vans have that option. RVs, most of them use propane. So to me, I consider that a con. So I don't know. What do you like? I mean, there's lots of pros and cons to both sides. I'm leaning more on the van side the more I make this list. But again, it comes down to that space. So they're two very different. Do you like staying in place for a while and then picking up and traveling? Or do you like being able to go pretty much almost anywhere that you can drive that van? So there you go. Stay with me, because when we come back, we're going to talk about some great national parks that you can go camping in. So stick around.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. We were just talking about RVs versus vans and which one is best for you, are the pros and cons of each. And I think we got through a really great list. And what is the best for you, an RV or a van? Which is your preference? It might just be simple, I like this over this. So there you go. But as promised, for sticking with us to the end of the show, we're going to talk about some of the best national parks to camp in, or at least a short list of what I would consider top national parks to go check out. And we're going to probably stay away from some of the more popular parks, but national parks in general, there's so many, And it really is crazy how we don't take advantage of some of the beautiful outdoor scenic areas. It's very easy to get sucked into, being in the city and doing things and just getting caught up in life and not taking a moment to really explore our own country. I mean, it's funny because we talk about traveling and wanting to go to the Swiss Alps and all these other exotic places, and you think about the beauty that we have right here in our own backyard in the States. There's some really gorgeous, gorgeous places to go. And if you have a van or an RV, you can pick up and go right now. That's right. For the rest of us, we have to make that trip or plan. So here's a couple of suggested national parks to camp in. Okay, now always, I'm going to put this out there before heading out or planning a trip to one of these national parks. Make sure that you are checking to make sure they're open, especially with COVID going on right now. Some of them are just started reopening. Some of them have been open for about a month or two. Some are going to be opening a little bit later. So make sure that you go online to their websites or call the number that you find and double check and always look and do your research on information before going. All right. So let's jump into this list because I think it's a really good list. There are, of course, plenty of others out there. These are just some that I fell in love with looking at. And to be honest, I have only been to one of these on my list. That's how great. Well, that's not true. I've been to two of them on my list, but I hadn't stayed in the second one for an extended period of time. So these are all now on my bucket list of places that I want to go check out. So if you are interested in this, you can get a notepad or, get on your phone and make some notes here. So the first one I'm going to go through or talk about is Elk Mont Campground. That's right. Elk Mont Campground is in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And if you haven't been to the Smoky Mountains National Park, it is absolutely gorgeous. There's so many areas. Basically, you're crossing North Carolina and Tennessee. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is one of the most visited national parks in the U.S. I mean, it really is. It's extremely popular for tents, RVs, and vans for camping. There's 200 drive-up sites and 9 wheelchair-accessible options. And you can make your reservations online. That's right. Not every national park can you make reservations online. I think more are going towards that direction, but there are still some that I have found that you cannot go online and make reservations. It's kind of a first-come, first-serve basis. So Elk Mont Campground, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, that is one that I would highly recommend checking out. Worth the drive, worth getting over there, especially if you're in that area. If you've never been to North Carolina and Tennessee, beautiful, gorgeous areas. And personally, I love in the fall. I've been there in the winter. It's cold. But the fall times around that area are absolutely stunning. So it might be something that you want to check out, more of one of those, right about now, like September, October type of trips, or, maybe to get a little bit less of some of the, not so much cold weather, but less of that heat. You can go, August, September. Another one. Okay, let's jump to my second one. I'm going to talk about right now, I recommend the Blackwoods Campground. That's in Arcadia National Park. And if you don't know where Arcadia National Park is, it's off the coast. It's on the coast of Maine, okay, up north. So yes, we don't typically think about national parks along the coast or up that way. But if you really take a moment to think about, if you get closer to Canada and up north there's so much more outdoors landscaping that is just absolutely gorgeous. So why not? So Blackwoods Campground up there, Arcadia National Park. You can get reservations to the Blackwoods campsite up to 3 months in advance. So if you really want to plan out that trip or you really want to make sure you have that spot, you can get 3 months advance reservations for this park. Okay, they're good for small and large tents and RVs. So, and I say RVs, but I'm throwing vans in there as well, because typically if they're going to, if you're going to be able to get an RV in there, you're going to be able to get a van in there. So small, large tents, good groups, RVs. There's also an Island Explorer shuttle that you can transport that you can take as a transport to other nearby destinations. So not only do you have the capabilities of being there, but having a free, without having to move your RV or tent or your whole campground, you can go on their Island Explorer shuttle and check out other areas and other destinations. So, and this is also, according to Travel and Leisure, Arcadia National Park calls itself the crown jewel of the North Atlantic coast. So that is according to Travel and Leisure. So anytime that you can say that it's the crown jewel of the North Atlantic coast, I think it's worth checking out. So there you go. This next one I love dearly, but I have been there and I've spent extensive time there, is Palo Canyon, and in North Texas in the Panhandle. Palo Canyon is located about an hour and 20 minutes north of Lubbock, Texas, so it's just south of Amarillo, and it's up there in the Panhandle. It's good for vans, tents, and small RVs, not large RVs. So camper vans, this is probably more of one of those van life type of things. You're not really going to want to be taking an RV down there because it is a canyon. You're literally driving down this canyon, and there's a lot of winding roads to get down there. It's absolutely gorgeous. And like any of the canyon or national parks that have canyons, you know, that you're driving into, just the way the sun hits them in the mornings, afternoons, and it's a different picture as you travel around or as you see it when you're there. So it's really remarkable. Gorgeous areas. There's a lot of cactus. You know, it's a little very much West Texas, but it has so much beauty in it. I really recommend it. They have campsites. There's some lodging. There are cabins that you can rent. You know, when I used to go, I'd be up there for probably about 2 nights, maybe 3 nights. But I would do several trips back and forth there. So it's really a great place for tent camping, or if you have your van, to do like a van down there where you can kind of be outside most of the time. It's really great. You're not going to want to be inside. So if you happen to be able to get an RV in there, you know, or even if you rent a cabin, you're going to want to be spending most of the time outside. So Palo Duro Canyon, definitely one that you should check out. All right, I'm going to jump to my fourth one on the list. This one, I am dying to go. The pictures alone just speak 1,000 words. It's Fish Creek Campground, and it's at Glacier National Park. And Glacier National Park is northwestern Montana. So first of all, anytime you can go to a glacier and you can travel a little bit closer than having to go to Alaska to see a glacier, to me, that is a huge win. It's just gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's 700 miles of hiking trails through the mountains and valleys, and they're carved by glaciers. So are you not sold? Hello, guys. Let's go. Start looking at those reservations right now for Fish Creek Campground. So they offer 178 campsites in the western part of the park, and there's 70 species of mammals that live in that area. That's a lot. If you're not an outdoors person, of course, this might not be your jam, but a glacier is just such a beautiful sight. A glacier. I love the idea. No, it's really gorgeous. They do have, it's the second largest campground in Glacier National Park. So Fish Creek does have a lot more possibilities or things. You can get reservations. The elevation that it's at is 3,500 feet. So this generally receives most of the rainfall. And daytime temperatures can exceed 90 degrees for its elevation. But, you know, again, you're going to want to just check things out, pack accordingly. But, man, 700 miles of hiking, that's where do you go when you get up there? Is it just, I'll just throw a dart and say, let's go here and check it out. Absolutely gorgeous. Go online, get your reservation, figure out how to get up there. It's absolutely breathtaking, at least from the pictures, so I'm highly recommending that one. Okay, the last one I'm going to recommend is the Mather Campground, and that's Grand Canyon National Park. And I figured I would end with the Mather Campground with the Grand Canyon National Park, because if you haven't been to the Grand Canyon or you haven't heard my podcast, check out the latest episode where I talked about a nice little trip through Arizona, starting with Phoenix, hitting up Red Rock Country and Sedona, and going up to the Grand Canyon. So there's a lot more information on that. So I'm not going to dive into too much about camping in the Grand Canyon, but it is completely worth it. It's beautiful. It's one of the most remarkable sites that you're going to see here in the U.S. I mean, all of them are, really. I mean, it's hard to pick one over the other, but it's absolutely breathtaking. There's so many different hiking trails, rock formations and things. Memories are going to be made that you will never forget. It's located on the south rim of the Grand Canyon Village. So if you go up, and you know what I'm talking about when you go and visit, you're going to want to go to the south rim of the Grand Canyon Village. And they have lodges. There's a visitor center, so you can get all the information. If you go online to the Grand Canyon National Park, there's so much information. It's going to be thrown at you. You're not going to know what to do with, so you can really kind of sift through on your own and see if this is your choice. Okay, it usually accepts reservations up to 6 months out. So they say usually. Again, we're in 2020, so who knows what's going to really be happening. And the campground is currently open right now, I know, for campers with existing reservations. So it may not be open for if you are looking to book now, but if you're looking for future, definitely something that you should check out. It is absolutely gorgeous. So there you guys go. Those are my recommended campgrounds and national park campgrounds to go check out. So whether you have a van, whether you have an RV, whether you just want to get in the car, throw that tent in the back, or just go for the day, these are all national parks and campgrounds that you guys should check out. I hope you've been inspired to take a trip this year or look to start planning one. It's never too late to start traveling. It can open our eyes to new experiences, even unlock things about ourselves that we never knew. I believe everyone should travel and explore more of what this world has to offer. It can give us an appreciation and love for so many things. So guys, let's start traveling.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.